The wind spoke in a dry whisper as it wound its way through the bones of Marrow Creek. Dust curled in slow spirals across the dying grass, catching the last fire of a sun too tired to warm anything. A dung-colored horse crested the rise above. The town, nostrils flaring, its flanks scored by old wounds. On its back sat a rider swathed in silence, broad-shouldered, long-limbed, coat worn smooth at the seams, hat pulled low against the amber light. He looked down at the remains of the place and saw nothing that stirred memory or promise. The town had not died all at once. That much could be read in the way some rooftops still held shingles, while others yawned open to the sky. A church steeple leaned westward, its bell long gone, as if it had screamed itself hoarse. Storefronts sat hollow. Only one chimney still smoked. He rode slow, boots loose in the stirrups, till the wind shifted, and he caught the sound thin, high, and human. A wail, ragged with cold, buried beneath the chatter of dead leaves. He turned toward it, hoarse snorting. Uneasily, the cradle sat crooked in the frame of a collapsed doorway, one side nearly swallowed by ash. A quilt-faded rose calico, frayed at the corners, was pulled halfway over a tiny shape. A baby girl, red-faced and squalling, fists raised to fight the air itself. The wind curled her hair into damp coils against her temple. She couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. The man sat in the saddle for a long while, unmoving. No note, no tracks. Just the crying, thin as thread and stubborn as old rust. Then he swung down, knees stiff from the ride. The cradle rocked as he approached. He crouched beside it, lifting the quilt. She blinked up at him through tears, breath hitching in panic or hope. His hands caressed, cracked, hovered near her, but did not touch. Finally he gathered her up, clumsily at first, then close. There was only one place left standing, a two-room cabin tucked behind a windbreak of juniper and rock, its chimney puffing steady into the cold. He walked the long way there, boots whispering across dead needles and frozen earth. The baby whimpered against his chest. He knocked. The door opened. After a pause, Clara Lark stood in the frame. Apron stained from root vegetables, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in the long-practiced manner of someone who had already survived too much to be startled by anything new. Her hair was gray, where it once had been black, plaited down her back with care. It's the shawl around her shoulders had belonged to someone else. Long ago? You lost? Hey, she asked. No, what's that you're holding? Cradle was sitting out by the burnt house. She was in it. Clara's gaze didn't flicker. So you brought her here. He didn't answer. Only adjusted the blanket tighter around the child. She looked past him, toward the pale ribbon of chimney smoke from the town's edge. She kin of yours? No. Another silence. Then, you got a name? He shook his head once. Don't need one. Clara studied him, then the baby. Her mouth tightened. You can't stay, she said. I figured. She was already turning away. But the baby hiccuped, coughed, and let out a sob that cracked through the air like thin ice. Clara stopped, one hand against the doorframe. Her shoulders rose, then settled again. She turned back. Barn's dry, she said. He nodded once, and she need milk. I've got goats. His eyes, pale as smoke, met hers. CHOP, wood. Clara didn't nod, but she didn't shut the door either. She stepped back inside, followed only far enough to place the baby in her arms. Clara held her without thinking, instinct older than words. She looked down, jaw clenched hard against something neither of them dared name. She's cold, Clara said softly. I walked fast, the man replied. She looked up at her name. No, I don't know if she's got one, I suppose. I'll give her one then. He stepped back into the dusk, pulled the door shut behind him, and walked toward the barn. His coat smelled of ash and saddle leather. Behind him, inside the house, the fire crackled and a baby's cry faded into the hush of dusk. The wind picked up again. It blew through the hollow church, past the broken rail fences, across the bones of a town left behind by time and found its way into the barn, where the nameless man rolled out his bedroll in the hay. He lay back, eyes open to the rafters, and listened to the silence press in around him. It was not a lonely silence, not anymore. not quite. The nights were sharp with frost. By dawn, the barn boards were stiff with it. The man's breath visible in the dim light as he rolled from his blanket and stood in the silence. He did not complain. He stoked the stove Clara had left half full with coals and stepped out into the crisp morning to split wood before the sun touched the tops of the cottonwoods. The axe handle had been worn smooth by other hands, and he gripped it like memory. His arms moved with practiced rhythm, the blade biting clean into dry logs, sending white chips flying across the brittle grass. Inside the cabin, Clara fed the baby goat's milk warmed in a tin cup. She held the child now with less hesitation. Her fingers moved on their own, lifting, wiping, rocking, pausing only to watch out the window as the stranger brought another log down with hard, silent grace. They did not speak that day, nor the next. He brought kindling. She left cornbread by the back stoop. In the evenings, Clara sat in her husband's chair by the fire, the baby curled against her shoulder. She never moved the things Red Elk had left behind. His feathered flute still lay on the mantel, gathering dust. The old wedding shirt stitched with bone buttons hung from a peg behind the bedroom door. A wood carving of a bear with its paw raised half-finished sat on the shelf above the hearth, untouched since the week before he died. The man's presence, like snowmelt, seeped into the edges of the house. She'd grown used to listening for nothing, but now she found herself straining at night for the faint creak of the barn door, the crunch of his boots. He never lingered near her, never stared, but she could feel the shape of his grief. It matched hers in weight, if not in form. Come the end of November, few wagons rattled into Marrow Creek. Just a handful of neighbors from upriver, Mrs. Pettigrew, with her spindly son, old Hezekiah, looking for lamp oil. They brought with them sacks of oats, jars of lard, and something. Heavier talk, they saw the man stacking firewood. The boy whispered, and Mrs. Pettigrew's mouth pinched shut. Later, Clara caught their voices near her stoop. Heard he was with that group near Palo Ridge, someone said. It's the ones paid to bring down outlaws, but didn't much care who they brought down. Some say he burned a whole Lakota camp. Some say he killed the men who did. No one's sure what side he was on. Clara didn't answer. She had lived long enough to know truth wore many faces and rumor only one. She remembered when they'd whispered about her, too. After Red Elk took sick and never rose from the bed again. After her daughter, light of hair and soft of voice, caught fever and slipped into stillness one bitter winter night. The town had not brought food. It brought questions. Now, they brought suspicion again, and left with it. That night, the wind turned cruel. Snow began to spit, not in drifts, but in hard, sudden bursts. The baby still nameless between them, though Clara had begun to think of her as Uni awoke with a harsh, throaty cry. Clara tried to settle her, pressing warm cloth to her belly, humming old Lakota lullabies Red Elk used to sing. Nothing calmed the child, and then the door opened. He entered without knocking, face half-shadowed by the storm behind him. Its coat was dusted white at the shoulders. Clara stood, startled, but did not raise her voice. "She's cold," he said simply. Clara hesitated, then stepped aside. He moved past her to the hearth, knelt beside the chair, and pulled the girl into his coat like it was second nature. She stopped crying within moments, her tiny hands gripping the edge of his collar. He sat in Red Elk's chair and began to rock, slow and even. The floorboards creaked beneath him, the fire casting long amber streaks across the wall. Clara stood across the room, arms folded, watching him. He did not look up. "I used to do this," he said after a while. Once, he didn't say. For whom she didn't ask. The baby breathed deeper. Her head lolled against his chest. Outside, the storm pressed against the windows, but inside, the quiet wrapped around them like a quilt. Clara stepped toward the chair. Her hand hovered near the back of it, but did not touch. Then she turned and went to the kitchen, where she began to boil water for tea she would not drink. They did not speak again that night. He stayed until the child was asleep, then laid her gently in the cradle Clara had placed near the fire. He left without a word. Clara sat long after, rocking the chair, though it was empty. listening to the storm lesson, feeling the weight of two griefs not spoken but shared. The storm began without warning. Low clouds folded in from the west, heavy with the scent of iron and old snow. By dusk, wind had swallowed the valley, and snow fell sideways like thrown flour. The man had already started dragging spare boards from the lean-to, nailing them across the weak seams in the cabin roof. Clara did not ask him to. She stood beneath the eaves in a shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, watching the way he moved, methodical and sure, as though he had known this house for years. When the cold sank into the seams of the windows, she opened the door and stepped aside. "You'll freeze out there," she said. He said nothing, only nodded once and stepped inside. That night they sat closer to the fire than before, not beside each other, but not far apart. The baby, now called Unia, gnawed at a cloth Clara had dipped in cooled broth. Her gums were swollen, her cheeks pink from fever, but her small hands still reached without fear. The man let her cling to his finger, his face unreadable, but still he carved something while she fussed small, careful. Cuts into a lump of pine until it became the rough shape of a bird, wings tucked tight to its sides. Clara watched the shavings curl and fall into his lap. "She's teething," Clara said. He gave a nod. "You had a child once?" His hands paused. "Long ago." He plaited Unia's soft hair with quiet patience, weaving 3 small braids with fingers too large for such delicacy. Clara felt something pull in her chest as she watched. She did not speak. "Who taught you that?" she asked finally. His voice was low. Her mother, no name. Just the ghost of a memory folded into the act. The storm thickened for days. They shared coffee in the mornings, sitting in silence until the kettle hissed dry. He repaired the barn door. She mended a ripped shirt he'd left on the porch. They talked about horses, how his dun gelding had come lame once in Wyoming, how she and Red Elk raised colts before the fever came. They spoke of fence wire and whetstones, but never names, never places. It was Clara who cracked first. She sat near the hearth, rocking Unia to sleep in Red Elk's chair. Her hands stroked the baby's back, her gaze far off. "My husband's name was Red Elk," she said. "He built this house with his bare hands. Told me the soil here remembered things and we ought to be kind to it." The man nodded. "He sounds like someone I'd have liked. He was—" She didn't say how. "He died." She didn't need to? The man stirred the coals, keeping his eyes on the embers. "I used to build fences for folks," he said. "Thought it might help them hold on to what they had. Did it? Sometimes not for long." The wind moaned around the cabin that night, but it wasn't only the weather that kept Clara awake. At first, she thought she'd dreamed the voice's soft syllables, not English, riding the wind in low repetition. She sat up in bed, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, listening. Then she saw them half-moon footprints in the snow, beyond the tree line. Several sets. Not fresh, but not old either. She stepped into her boots, pulled her coat around her, and opened the door. The man was already outside, rifle across his back. He wasn't moving, just watching. "You hear them?" she asked. He nodded. "Lakota." "Yes." She stared into the dark, the storm having hushed enough for the branches to be heard creaking. "Why don't you go after them?" He didn't turn, "Because they know I'm here." Clara's voice caught. "Then who are they following?" He looked at her, face weathered but steady. "It ain't me they're following." She felt the cold reach through her coat, then not from the wind, but from something else. Something older. He saw it in her face. If they meant harm, they'd have come in daylight. This is something else. She stared at him a long moment, then turned and went back inside, bolting the door behind her. He remained outside for a while longer, eyes scanning the darkness until the prints blurred beneath new snow. Then he leaned the rifle against the porch rail and sat beside it, coat drawn close, watching, not guarding for himself. Watching for her inside, the baby slept curled in Clara's arms. Clara did not sleep. She stared at the ceiling and thought about braids and rifles, about how silence could be more than absence. It could be waiting, it could be trust, or warning. The snow retreated with hesitation, pulling back in strips from the fields like a tide too proud to admit defeat. Buds swelled on the cottonwoods, and the first green blades pushed through the brown like stubborn memory. Unia crawled now. Quick, head wobbling, the faintest giggle rising when she found her way beneath tables or into baskets of firewood. The man stayed. He repaired the barn's cracked beam with a measured patience that spoke of long labor done in many towns. He sanded the splintered yoke on Clara's wagon, oiled the axle until it turned like a thought. He didn't ask for thanks, and none was spoken. Clara, in turn, began cooking like she used to bacon, thick and sweet in the skillet. Beans with salt pork and vinegar, fresh biscuits set by the fire's edge to rise. They ate across from one another, speaking only of what needed saying. He praised her coffee once. She offered him the last piece of bread without a word. In these small things, a rhythm began to take shape, but peace does not last in quiet places. They came in the hour before supper, their coats lined with dust and voices too loud for such a still land. 5 men, one of them deputy, Callan broad-shouldered, pale-eyed, the kind who'd rather shoot a question than ask it. He reined in hard at the gate, that him, called to no one in particular. The man stepped from the barn, wiping his hands with a rag. Callan's lips curled. "Ain't he the one from Palo Ridge?" The others murmured. Clara stood in the doorway, her apron still dusted with flour. Heard he turned on his own crew. "Bounty men. Good men. They burned a village," the man said quietly. "They killed women. Children," Callan laughed without humor. "And you shot 4 of 'em for it. What's that make you, huh? Some kind of savior?" "I shot 4. Left one breathing." "Convenient," Callan muttered. Then, to Clara, "You harboring him?" She didn't flinch. "He's done nothing wrong here." "Not yet," Callan said. "But ghosts drag trouble, and this place has seen enough." He turned to the man. "You ride out by dawn, or we drag you out by dusk." Then they left, boots creaking, horses stamping mud across the threshold of spring. That night, Clara did not speak. She cooked slowly, movements tight. Ash from the hearth had drifted into the butter pan, and she did not scrape it out. The man said nothing about the taste. After Unia fell asleep, Clara rose. From the back of the house, she brought Red Elk's wedding shirt. It had not been touched in years. The bone buttons gleamed in the firelight, and the faded beadwork still caught the eye. She did not hand it to him. She simply placed it across the hearth rail and walked away. He saw it, saw her meaning. She was not offering ownership. She was offering memory, a place earned, not inherited. He did not sleep in the barn that night, but neither did he take to her bed. Instead, he lay on the floor near the fire, his rifle beside him. When the logs burned low, Unia woke and crawled toward him, her fingers brushing his shirt, then his hand. Clara sat nearby, hands folded in her lap. And then, for the first time since she buried her husband, she wept. Not loudly, not broken, but with a softness that sounded like letting go. The man did not move toward her. He placed his hand on the floor between them, open, steady, not asking. A boundary, a promise. Outside, the wind whispered through the new leaves. Inside, the silence held them all, not with fear, but with something like belonging. The night cracked open with the smell of kerosene. The barn went first, lit from 3 sides, flames leaping into the starless dark like they'd been waiting for breath. Horses screamed. Timber popped. The fire painted the snow orange, turned the familiar world into shadow and roar.
Ow!
The man was already moving. He shoved open the cabin door, barefoot and shirtless, rifle in hand. Clara was up before he spoke, grabbing Unia from her cradle. No questions passed between them, only instinct. He yanked the root cellar open, handed her the lantern, helped her down the earthen steps. Unia wailed against Clara's chest as the heavy door slammed shut above them. Then he turned toward the fire. They came through Smoke Callan and 2 others, rifles raised, eyes wide with the kind of righteousness that always came too late. A 3rd man hung back, uneasy, shifting from foot to foot like he'd rather be anywhere else. The man didn't shout, didn't warn. He moved like something carved from the land, swift, sure, unhesitating. The first shot missed him. His didn't. One man fell backward into snow. The second dropped his gun and ran, cursing. Fallon came last, charging through the smoke like a man chasing a ghost. They fought beneath the skeletal ribs of the burning. Barn fists, elbows, a knife flashing once in the firelight. The man took a cut along the ribs, but drove Callan to his knees with the butt of his rifle. And then Clara was there, rifle in hand, standing behind him. Her hair loose, her breath fogged. At! The flame reflected in her eyes, not fear, but fury. A mother, a widow, a witness. He spat. You think you've won? The man stepped back, lowering his rifle. You ain't worth burying. Turned to Clara. Let him walk. He's already lost more than he knows. She stared at Callan a long moment, then nodded. Callan stumbled away into the smoke, clutching his side. By morning, the barn was gone, a black ruin. Snow fell again, quiet, ashamed. Of the 3 men who came with Callan, only one body remained. Clara helped the man bury him behind the lean-to. No marker, no prayer, no. In the ashes near the house, the cradle had survived. Blackened at the edges, the quilt singed, but intact. That evening, Clara sat on the porch, Unia in her lap. The man repaired the barn's tool chest with salvaged wood. Neither spoke. Then Clara took Unia's hair in her fingers and braided it, slow and careful. When she was done, she let her own hair down, brushed it out, and wove it into 3 even strands. Then, holding the braid loosely in her hands, she looked at the man. He didn't move, didn't reach, but he stayed. The firelight flickered in his eyes, somewhere between the smoke and the snow, between what was burned and what was saved. Something passed between them, not a promise, not yet, but the space for one. And in that space, the wind forgot the names it had carried. It carried theirs instead. The land softened under April's hand. Snowmelt carved thin lines through the soil, and birds returned in pairs to the cottonwood grove. Frost still visited at dawn, but it did not linger. Life pressed gently at the edges of grief like grass, pushing up through grave dirt. In the mornings, Clara brewed strong coffee and hummed Lakota lullabies. She began teaching the man the words slowly, like planting seeds. He repeated them with care, stumbling at first, then shaping syllables. As though afraid to bruise them, he sat with Unia by the hearth, rocking slowly. Her fingers found the buttons on his shirt, the dark stubble on his jaw, the lines beside his eyes. Her first word came one afternoon as rain whispered against the windows. "Pa," she said, soft and certain, reaching for his hand. Clara heard it from the table. She did not speak, only turned her face toward the window, smiling where he could not see. The next day, the man rode out alone. His horse moved slow across the greening prairie, hooves sinking deep into softened earth. He passed the ridge where once the tribes had camped, ghost circles of fire still marked in the grass, old stones charred by wind and history. There, beneath a bent sycamore, he dismounted. From his saddlebag he drew a bundle wrapped in cloth. His rifle, a small medicine pouch, 2 silver coins, and a braid of black horsehair. He laid them beneath the tree, pressing them into the soil with his bare hands. A gesture without witness, a reckoning without judgment. It's not an offering to the spirits, but to the earth itself, to memory, to what he could not change but would no longer carry. When he returned near dusk, Clara was feeding Unia by the fire. She looked up. He dismounted, walked in. He sat beside her on the floor, silent for a long time. Then he said, "Samuel." Clara turned. "What?" "That's my name." She looked at him, long and quiet, as if hearing something through the walls. Then she placed her hand over his. This time, there was no distance between them. They rebuilt the barn in the weeks that followed, using what would remain. He carved new joints, and she fitted the beams. Unia crawled through sawdust and sunshine. It did not rush the work. Nothing good had ever come fast. The cradle, scorched, but whole, was brought into the house and set beside the hearth. The rocking chair, Clara's chair, once her husband's, now shared, never stopped moving. Summer pressed in slowly, warm and golden. A breeze carried the smell of horses and sage. At night, the three of them sat outside as stars thickened. Above the hills, sang little, but sang enough. One morning, as snow fell again, light, late, harmless, Unia stood on her own, small hands gripping the window frame. She babbled toward the light, proud of her balance. Behind her, Clara placed a blanket on the rocker. Samuel stirred the fire with Red Elk's old iron poker. The room smelled of ash and bread. Sunlight stretched long through the window panes. And in its path, three shadows spilled across the floor. Not one of them alone. Not anymore.